Imagine a lavish autumn party 15 years ago, filled with journalists and intellectuals. Over drinks, the conversation turns to the ultimate moral question. Which is worse, capital punishment or life imprisonment? The host, a wealthy banker, takes a firm stance. He argues that the death penalty is faster, more moral, and far more humane than locking a man away. Why drag the life out of someone over decades when an executioner can finish it in minutes? But a young 25-year-old lawyer in the crowd pushes back. He argues that any form of life, even existing in total solitary confinement, is preferable to death. Ego quickly takes over. The banker, younger and highly volatile in those days, slams his fist on the table. He bets 2 million rubles that the lawyer couldn't last even 5 years in solitary confinement. The young lawyer accepts, but pride pushes him further. He volunteers to stay locked away not for 5 years, but for 15. What started as hypothetical parlor talk over cigars immediately becomes a binding contract. 2 men, driven entirely by arrogance and greed, have just wagered their lives. The physical rules of the confinement were absolute. The lawyer would be locked inside a small lodge in the banker's garden, forbidden from crossing the threshold, seeing another human face, or hearing a single spoken word. His only connection to the outside world was a small, purpose-built window. Through it, he could pass notes to request books, music, or wine, receiving them in total silence. This diagram illustrates the strict, zero-tolerance timeline of the wager, starting precisely at noon on November 14, 1870. If the prisoner stepped out even 2 minutes before the 15-year deadline in 1885, the contract was void. He would get nothing. The true terror of this arrangement was psychological. The door wasn't locked from the outside. The lawyer always had the power to walk away and end his suffering. His true prison was his own willpower. For the first 5 years, the isolation nearly broke him. He refused wine, played the piano day and night, and requested light romance novels just to escape the crushing loneliness of the room. Then, in year 6, his approach changed. He furiously ordered texts on languages, philosophy, and history. He mastered them so thoroughly that he wrote a letter in 6 different languages, asking the banker to fire 2 shots in the garden if the translations were flawless. The shots were fired. By year 10, a strange paradox emerged. A man who had just devoured 600 complex volumes spent an entire year reading only one simple book, the Gospel. In his final 2 years, his reading became frantic and erratic. He would order a manual on medicine, alongside a chemistry text, followed immediately by Shakespeare and theology. He was grabbing at the sum of human knowledge like a drowning man clutching at wreckage. His physical body decayed in a tiny box, but his intellect expanded to conquer thousands of years of human thought. While the prisoner's mind expanded, the banker's world collapsed. On the eve of the deadline, the once proud millionaire is now a fragile, terrified old man pacing his study. 15 years of desperate gambling decimated his fortune. The frenetic chaos of the stock exchange slowly drained his wealth until nothing remained but debts. Now he faces a brutal reality. If he pays the 2 million rubles tomorrow at noon, he will be utterly bankrupt and publicly disgraced. The massive open world offered the banker endless freedom. His unchecked greed reduced him to a trembling slave. Cornered, the banker's mind turns to the unthinkable. To save himself from ruin and the humiliation of owing his life to the lawyer, he decides the man has to die tonight. At 3 a.m, the banker slips out of his house into the freezing rain. He creeps toward the lodge with the key to a door that hasn't been opened in a decade and a half. He reasons that if he smothers the sleeping man, no expert could prove it wasn't natural causes. Once the deed is done, suspicion will easily fall on the sleeping watchman. The wager reaches its logical end. The wealthy, civilized host is now willing to commit cold-blooded murder to protect his pride. When he breaks the seals and enters the room, the sight freezes him. At the table sits a man who looks like an emaciated skeleton. His skin is drawn tight over hollow cheeks, his hair long and graying. The banker stands over the half-dead creature. It would take almost no effort to throw him on the bed and end his life. But then he notices a letter on the desk. In it, the lawyer explains that through his books, he has lived countless lives. He has loved women, conquered kingdoms, and gazed upon majestic snow-capped mountain peaks. He experienced all the world's beauty entirely in his mind. But the letter continues. The lawyer declares that having consumed all human wisdom, he now finds it worthless. He realizes that wealth, history, and human accomplishments are all fleeting mirages, doomed to be wiped from the earth. To prove his contempt for the material world, the lawyer announces his final move. He will climb out the window 5 hours before the deadline, intentionally voiding the contract and forfeiting the 2 million rubles. Reading this, the banker realizes how pathetic his murder plot actually is. The prisoner achieved a level of spiritual enlightenment that makes the money and the banker's desperation to keep it completely irrelevant. Overwhelmed by a sudden, crushing wave of self-contempt, the banker kisses the sleeping man on the head. He flees the tiny room, weeping. The next morning, the watchmen come running. They witness the prisoner climb out the window and disappear into the garden, exactly as he promised. To avoid questions, the banker takes the lawyer's written renunciation, brings it back to his house, and locks it away in a fireproof safe. The penniless prisoner walked away into the world perfectly free. The banker, however, will spend the rest of his days locked in his own fear, hoarding a meaningless piece of paper that proves the total bankruptcy of his soul.